In 1925, 6 respected businessmen entered a Paris hotel, believing the French government had quietly decided to sell the Eiffel Tower. One of them paid a fortune, added a private bribe, and left convinced he had purchased thousands of tons of government metal. The tower was never for sale, the official never existed, and the buyer stayed silent because admitting the truth felt worse. History remembers conquerors who seized cities, but some of its boldest victories belong to people armed only with confidence and paperwork. Great con artists rarely offered obvious nonsense. They wrapped impossible promises inside details that looked ordinary, official, and reassuring. A forged seal, polished shoes, rented offices, or early profits could make suspicion feel far less reasonable than simple trust. These 4 schemes sold a country, a bridge, a monument, and impossible investment, returns to people who considered themselves careful. Each fraud succeeded differently, yet all depended on victims completing the lie with their own hopes, ambitions, and embarrassment. Gregor MacGregor began as a Scottish soldier and adventurer, serving in Latin American independence campaigns during the early 19th century. He returned to Britain with military stories, impressive titles, and a new claim that sounded almost too fortunate to question. MacGregor called himself Kazika Poyai, ruler of a prosperous Central American territory, supposedly waiting for British settlers and investors. The land behind his story was real, but the functioning nation he described existed mainly in maps, documents, and imagination. His Poyais had a capital city, government offices, fertile farms, navigable rivers, and valuable resources ready for immediate development. MacGregor published guidebooks filled with detailed geography, statistics, commercial opportunities, and confident descriptions of a society few readers could verify. He printed Poyaisian currency, created official-looking certificates, and issued supposedly government-backed national bonds through London's rapidly expanding financial markets. The paperwork did more than support the lie. It allowed buyers to hold something physical and mistake possession for proof. Britain was experiencing intense enthusiasm for overseas investment, especially speculative ventures connected to newly independent countries across Latin America. MacGregor entered that excitement perfectly, offering patriotic adventure, social advancement, cheap land, and profits from a country supposedly eager for settlers. Families sold businesses, exchanged savings for Poyaisian money, and purchased supplies for lives they believed would begin across the Atlantic. Recruiters and published testimonials made departure feel respectable, while maps transformed an unfamiliar coastline into streets, farms, and future prosperity. In 1822, the first settlers sailed from Britain carrying tools, furniture, clothing, medicine, and expectations carefully built by MacGregor's campaign. Another ship followed, bringing the total number of emigrants toward 250 people committed to the promised settlement. When they reached the coast, no capital welcomed them, no government received them, and no prepared homes waited beyond the shore. They found wilderness, abandoned structures, limited supplies, and harsh conditions completely unlike the comfortable descriptions printed back in Britain. At first, some settlers assumed officials had been delayed, because accepting a temporary problem felt easier than admitting total deception. Weeks passed, food spoiled, shelter remained inadequate, and disease spread through a community never equipped for the environment surrounding them. Their Poyaisian money purchased nothing, their land documents guaranteed nothing, and the authority behind every promise remained an ocean away. Survivors eventually reached British Honduras with outside assistance, but many settlers had already died from disease, hunger, and deprivation. News returned to Britain, turning MacGregor's celebrated opportunity into a scandal involving grieving families, lost savings, and worthless national bonds. Even then, belief did not vanish immediately. Some survivors defended MacGregor or blamed local agents for destroying an otherwise legitimate project. That loyalty revealed the fraud's deepest strength. Admitting deception also meant admitting that sacrifice, confidence, and personal judgment had failed. MacGregor left Britain, attempted related schemes in France, faced arrest, and somehow avoided lasting punishment through uncertainty and legal complexity. Years later, he returned to Venezuela, where his earlier military service helped secure recognition and a pension before his death. The contrast was extraordinary. The man who invented a nation eventually finished life honored for a genuine revolutionary past. Poyais remains more disturbing than an ordinary financial fraud because investors did not merely lose money. Families physically traveled into the lie. MacGregor sold hope in national form, proving that maps and titles can make an imaginary future feel geographically real. But while he invented a country across the ocean, the next swindler sold something millions of people could see every day. George C. Parker worked in New York, where constant immigration created both opportunity and confusion for newcomers trying to understand ownership. He became famous for schemes involving public landmarks, especially the Brooklyn Bridge, which he reportedly offered to unsuspecting buyers. The exact number of sales has grown through legend, but contemporary reports confirm Parker repeatedly used property he did not own. His targets were often recent arrivals carrying savings and looking for a quick business opportunity in an unfamiliar city. Parker or his associates presented forged deeds, official seals, legal language, and persuasive explanations about private ownership hidden behind public appearance. The bridge became attractive because enormous crowds crossed daily, making toll collection sound like a simple path towards steady income. A buyer did not need to understand engineering, he only needed to imagine a booth collecting coins from endless pedestrians. According to popular accounts, some victims reached the bridge and attempted to establish toll barriers before police explained the situation. That moment completed the humiliation. Strangers discovered publicly that New York City had never authorized or recognized their expensive purchase. Parker also became associated with fraudulent sales involving the Statue of Liberty, museums, theaters, and other unmistakably public properties. Every landmark carried Belten credibility because victims could visit it, inspect it, and mistake visibility for proof of ownership. He understood that nobody expects a fraudster to offer something so famous, because the outrageous scale can strangely reduce suspicion. New York's legal system repeatedly caught Parker, but short sentences allowed him to return to the same profession with new names. He used aliases, changed appearances, forged documents, and approached different communities before warnings could spread widely enough to stop him. His reputation eventually became part of American language, helping popularize the idea of offering someone a bridge when mocking gullibility. Yet the familiar phrase hides real victims, many of whom arrived seeking security and instead encountered a city expert at exploiting confusion. Parker's schemes worked because official ownership was abstract, while paper documents and confident explanations felt immediate, concrete, and understandable. By 1928, authorities treated him as a habitual offender and imposed a life sentence under New York's stricter criminal laws. He spent his final years at Sing Sing, reportedly entertaining other prisoners with stories from a career built on impossible property deals. Over time, newspapers and storytellers exaggerated parts of his life, making it difficult to separate Parker's documented frauds from criminal folklore. That uncertainty suits the subject, because Parker's greatest product was never the bridge itself. It was a believable version of ownership. He sold victims the right to imagine themselves standing beside a famous landmark while money flowed directly into their hands. The Brooklyn Bridge never changed owners, but Parker repeatedly changed what newcomers believed the bridge represented for their futures. His fraud depended on a public monument appearing privately profitable. Victor Lustig would use the same idea against experienced businessmen. Instead of targeting confused newcomers, Lustig invited established scrap dealers into a luxury hotel and treated the impossible sale as government business. Victor Lustig was born in Austria-Hungary and built a career across Europe and America using aliases, charm, languages, and careful observation. He dressed elegantly, spoke softly, and rarely appeared hurried, allowing other people to interpret calmness as authority and social importance. In Paris during 1925, Lustig noticed newspaper discussion about the Eiffel Tower's maintenance costs and public debate surrounding its future. The tower had originally been built for the 1889 World's Fair, making rumors about eventual removal sound historically plausible. Lustig created government stationery and presented himself as a senior official responsible for an extremely sensitive and confidential public decision. He invited several leading scrap metal dealers to a confidential private meeting at the fashionable Hôtel de Crillon in Paris. Secrecy was essential, he explained, because citizens might react angrily if they learned the government planned to dismantle their landmark. The dealers were shown official-looking documents, treated respectfully, and driven past the tower as though inspecting material already awaiting purchase. Lustig watched each man's reactions and selected André Poisson, a businessman eager to strengthen his position within Parisian industry. Poisson's wife reportedly remained suspicious, forcing Lustig to add another convincing layer instead of pushing the original story harder. He privately suggested that government officials expected personal payments, turning his questionable behavior into evidence of ordinary bureaucratic corruption. The requested bribe reassured Poisson because dishonesty at a smaller level made the much larger transaction feel more authentic. Poisson paid for the supposed metal rights and added the bribe, while Lustig quickly left France with the money. When the truth became unavoidable, Poisson chose not to report the fraud, fearing publicity would damage his business and reputation. His silence gave Lustig something more valuable than money, time, privacy, and evidence that humiliation could protect a successful con artist. After waiting abroad, Lustig returned to Paris and attempted the same Eiffel Tower scheme with another group of dealers. The second effort raised suspicion, and he escaped before authorities could trap him, leaving the tower unsold but his legend secured. Lustig later operated in the United States, where he used counterfeit schemes, investment frauds, and a famous device called the money box. The box supposedly copied banknotes through a chemical process, but it merely released genuine notes hidden inside at timed intervals. Victims saw early results, paid enormous sums, and discovered the mechanism's complete emptiness only after Lustig had safely disappeared. He even encountered Al Capone, borrowing money for a promised scheme, then returning it untouched after claiming the opportunity had failed. Capone reportedly rewarded his apparent honesty, giving Lustig money and confirming that restraint can sometimes produce more trust than profit. Federal agents eventually pursued him for counterfeiting, a crime threatening the currency system more directly than his theatrical landmark sales. He escaped custody once, was captured again, convicted, and sent to Alcatraz, where illness ended his career in 1947. Lustig's Eiffel Tower fraud remains memorable because every carefully chosen detail made an absurd proposition feel like confidential government procedure. He did not sell metal, he sold access, secrecy, status, and the flattering belief that buyers had entered a privileged room. Yet his victims paid once, while Charles Ponzi built a machine requiring new believers every day, simply to keep yesterday's promises alive. Charles Ponzi arrived in North America with little money and spent years moving between jobs, prisons, businesses, and increasingly ambitious ideas. In Boston after the First World War, he noticed international postal reply coupons could theoretically be exchanged across countries at different values. The basic price difference existed, but converting coupons at enormous scale was impractical, slow, and nowhere near as profitable as promised. Ponzi nevertheless advertised extraordinary returns, offering investors 50% profit within 45 days or double their money within 90. At first, suspicious customers invested small amounts, then received payments exactly when promised and returned with friends, relatives, and larger savings. Those early payments created living advertisements, because a neighbor holding real cash sounded more convincing than any distant newspaper warning. Ponzi opened offices, hired employees, attracted crowds, and appeared surrounded by the visible machinery of a rapidly growing legitimate business. Money arrived faster than staff could count it, while investors lined hallways convinced they had discovered an opportunity before everyone else. Behind the excitement, very few postal coupons were actually purchased, and no realistic trading system generated the promised profits. New deposits paid earlier investors, creating the circular structure that would permanently attach Ponzi's name to this form of fraud. The system grew because successful withdrawals strengthened trust, while people who reinvested reduced the immediate cash Ponzi needed to provide. He cultivated a generous public image, bought a mansion, acquired a bank interest, and spoke as though wealth proved financial intelligence. Journalists began asking how the operation worked, and basic calculations showed the required coupon volume would exceed anything visible worldwide. Financial writer Clarence Barron argued that Ponzi himself was not investing as someone genuinely confident in his claimed opportunity should. Boston authorities and newspapers investigated, creating panic among depositors who suddenly wanted cash instead of promises and reassuring explanations. Ponzi initially met withdrawals, standing before crowds and projecting confidence, while money continued leaving faster than new deposits arrived. That performance briefly calmed supporters, some of whom defended him passionately because they had already been paid or wanted belief preserved. Then investigators uncovered earlier convictions, false statements, and financial records showing the entire business could never support its obligations. The scheme collapsed in 1920, leaving thousands of investors with losses while the phrase Ponzi scheme entered financial vocabulary. Courts convicted him, and years of federal and state imprisonment followed before authorities eventually deported him back to Italy. He later lived in Brazil with declining health and little money, far removed from the crowds once competing to invest. Ponzi did not invent circular investment fraud, but his spectacular rise gave the structure a name recognized throughout the modern world. His promise worked because early investors received real money, proving that fraud can manufacture evidence when new victims finance the demonstration. Unlike a fake country or landmark sale, Ponzi's product was time itself. Today's deposits postponed yesterday's moment of truth. MacGregor sold belonging, Parker sold ownership, Lustig sold privileged access, and Ponzi sold the feeling that wealth had discovered you first. Each understood that greed alone explains too little. Victims also wanted security, respect, adventure, independence, or proof they had judged wisely. The most effective frauds do not erase doubt completely. They give people reasons to treat doubt as fear, jealousy, or missed opportunity. Official paper, famous landmarks, early profits, and expensive surroundings all became props supporting stories that victims already wanted to continue. Embarrassment then protected the fraudsters, because reporting the truth meant publicly describing how carefully confidence had been manufactured and misplaced. These schemes survived until reality demanded something. Paperwork could not provide a country, legal ownership, government authority, or genuine profit. History's boldest con artists sold impossible things by making disbelief feel foolish, while belief felt ambitious, informed, and almost inevitable.